Ladies and gentlemen, if he's pulling away, the worst thing you can do is panic. And that's exactly what most people do. They start explaining, over-texting, over-giving, over-proving. They start chasing clarity instead of commanding respect. Listen to me closely. When someone starts to pull back, it's not the moment to run after them. It's the moment to stop, breathe, and regain your power. Because attraction doesn't grow in desperation. It grows in strength, confidence, and self-control. When he starts to pull away, your instinct might scream at you to chase, to fix, to ask questions that don't really need answers. You want reassurance, clarity, confirmation that you still matter. But chasing in that moment does the exact opposite of what you want. It doesn't bring him closer. It quietly pushes him further away. Because when you chase someone who is stepping back, you shift the balance of the connection. You move from being chosen to asking to be chosen. And that shift is felt instantly, even if nothing is said out loud. Chasing sends a message you never intended to send. It tells him that you're afraid of losing him, that your emotional stability depends on his presence, that you're willing to bend yourself to keep him from leaving. And once that message is delivered, attraction weakens. Not because you're not valuable, but because value doesn't beg to be seen. Confidence doesn't knock repeatedly on a closed door. Strength stands still and lets the other person decide whether they want to come closer or walk away. The moment you stop chasing, something powerful happens inside you first. Your nervous energy settles. Your thoughts slow down. You stop replaying every conversation and start hearing your own voice again. That inner shift matters because people respond to energy before they respond to words. When you're calm, grounded, and centered, the dynamic changes without you having to explain or announce anything. He feels the absence of pressure, and in that space, he begins to think. Not chasing doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to refuse to abandon your dignity. It means you trust that what's meant to stay won't require you to run it down. When you hold your position instead of pursuing, you give him room to feel your absence emotionally. And absence, when paired with strength, creates reflection. Reflection leads to awareness. Awareness leads to effort. Chasing turns love into a transaction. You're constantly paying and hoping the other person doesn't leave. Not chasing turns love back into a choice he has to make on his own, without persuasion, without reminders, without emotional labor from you. And if he chooses to step forward, he does it because he wants to, not because you pulled him back. When someone pulls away, most people think the solution is to close the gap as fast as possible. They text more, call more, explain more, and give more of themselves, hoping that extra effort will restore the connection. But closeness forced too soon doesn't feel like love. It feels like pressure. And pressure makes people retreat even further. Space, when used with intention, is not distance. It is breathing room. It is the pause that allows emotions to settle and clarity to rise, create. Space doesn't mean disappearing in anger or using silence as a weapon. It means stepping back calmly and allowing the dynamic to reset. When you remove pressure, you remove the need for defense. He no longer feels like he has to protect his freedom or justify his emotion. Instead, he's left alone with his thoughts, and that's where space does its real work. In quiet moments, people reflect. They replay conversations. They notice what's missing. They feel the absence that constant availability used to cover up. Pressure demands answers immediately. Space allows feelings to surface naturally. When you stop asking where you stand, he has to ask himself why you're no longer reaching. When you stop filling every silence, the silence starts speaking to him. It reminds him of your presence by highlighting your absence. And that contrast can be far more powerful than any message you could send. Space also restores your emotional balance. It pulls your focus away from monitoring his behavior and brings it back to your own life. Your routines, your passions, your sense of self start to reappear. That grounded energy is felt, even from a distance. It changes how you show up when interaction does happen. You're no longer seeking reassurance, you're standing in confidence. And confidence is magnetic in a way anxiety never is. Most people are afraid that if they create space, the connection will disappear. But if a connection can only survive when you're constantly holding it together, it was already fragile. Real interest doesn't fade in healthy space. It either deepens or reveals the truth. Space doesn't push away what's real. It exposes what isn't. And in doing so, it gives you clarity, power, and emotional control without you having to say a single word. When he creates distance, the natural reaction is either to chase harder or to pull away dramatically. Both come from emotion, not self-respect. Matching distance with self-respect is about neither begging nor punishing. It's about responding with calm control. You don't mirror his silence to make him feel pain, and you don't flood him with attention to make him stay. You simply adjust your energy to meet the moment without losing yourself, and its self-respect shows up in what you don't do. You don't demand explanations that haven't been offered. You don't interrogate tone, timing, or response speed. You don't twist yourself into emotional shapes just to keep the connection alive. When you match distance with self-respect, you send a quiet but powerful message that your peace does not depend on someone else's availability. That message is felt immediately. Even if nothing is said out loud, there's strength in restraint. When you pause instead of reacting, you give yourself time to observe rather than assume. You stop personalizing every change in behavior and start recognizing patterns for what they are. This grounded response shifts the power dynamic. Instead of him controlling the emotional temperature by how present or absent he is, you regain control by staying centered no matter what he does. Matching distance with self-respect also protects your dignity. You stay kind, open, and authentic, but you stop overextending. You respond instead of pursue. You engage instead of chase. That balance keeps your value intact. It reminds him that your attention is not unlimited and your emotional energy is not something to be taken for granted. People often don't realize the weight of what they're losing until it's no longer constantly offered. This approach forces honesty into the connection. If he cares, the space created by your self-respect will draw him forward with intention. If he doesn't, the distance will grow without resistance, saving you from investing further in something one-sided. Either way, you win clarity. You are no longer trapped in emotional confusion or waiting for signals that never fully arrive. Matching distance with self-respect isn't about control, strategy, or games. It's about alignment. You align your actions with your worth. You choose stability over anxiety, dignity over desperation, and self-trust over fear. And when you stand in that place, you stop asking whether you're enough, because your behavior already answers that question. When someone starts to pull away, your attention naturally shifts toward them. You start watching their behavior, their response time, their tone, their effort. Your energy follows their movement, and without realizing it, your life begins to orbit around their uncertainty. Redirecting your energy back to your life is how you break that cycle. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about remembering that your world existed before them and should never shrink because of them. The moment you turn your focus inward, something stabilizes. You stop reaching for external validation and start grounding yourself in familiar routines, goals, and passion. The things that once brought you joy begin to feel important again. This shift is powerful because it rebuilds your emotional center. Instead of waiting for messages or signs, you're living. And living energy is attractive in a way that anxious waiting never is. When your energy is tied up in someone else's behavior, you give away control. Every action they take has the power to affect your mood. Redirecting your energy takes that power back. You invest in your growth, your health, your creativity, your friendships. You move your body. You challenge your mind. You reconnect with parts of yourself that may have been neglected while you were trying to keep a connection alive. This redirection change as the dynamic without confrontation. He notices the shift, even if he can't explain it. You're no longer always available, always adjusting, always accommodating. Your presence feels different because it's no longer driven by fear of loss. It's driven by wholeness. And when someone senses that you are full within yourself, they either step up to meet you or quietly fade away. Most importantly, redirecting your energy protects you. It prevents emotional burnout and self-abandonment. You stop putting your happiness on hold while waiting for someone else to decide what they want. You remind yourself that you are the constant in your life, not anyone else. That reminder builds confidence from the inside out. As you return to your own rhythm, your standards naturally rise. You become more aware of what feels aligned and what feels draining. You stop trying to fit into someone else's uncertainty and start honoring your own stability. And in that space, you regain clarity, strength, and emotional independence that no one can take from you. When you speak from desperation, it's loud even when your voice is quiet. It shows up in long messages, repeated questions, emotional explanations, and the need to be understood right now. Desperation tries to convince, persuade, and rescue something that feels like it's slipping away. Strength doesn't do that. Strength doesn't argue for its place. Strength allows silence to carry the weight of what words no longer can. Letting strength speak means you stop explaining your feelings to someone who already knows how they're making you feel. It means you stop presenting evidence of your value to someone who should already see it. Desperation hopes to be chosen by force of effort. Strength assumes choice will happen naturally or not at all. And that assumption changes everything about how you show up. When you move from desperation to strength, your behavior shifts before your emotions fully catch up. You pause instead of reacting. You respond instead of reaching. You hold back instead of spilling everything at once. This restraint isn't coldness, it's clarity. It tells the other person that your emotions are deep, but they're also contained. That containment feels safe. It feels mature. It feels like something worth leaning toward rather than running from. Strength doesn't chase reassurance. It creates an environment where reassurance becomes necessary for the other person. When you stop asking where you stand, the silence invites them to consider where they stand with you. When you stop pushing for answers, the lack of pressure brings awareness to the surface. Desperation demands immediate certainty. Strength allows time to reveal truth. There's also something deeply attractive about emotional self-control, not suppression, but regulation. You still feel everything, but you don't let every feeling control your action. That tells the other person that you're not fragile, not easily shaken, not dependent on constant valida tie-in. It shifts the emotional power balance without confrontation or ultimatums. Most people believe they need to say more to be understood. In reality, saying less with confidence often says everything. When you don't rush to fill gaps, the gaps start working for you. They highlight your absence, your presence, your value. They give the other person space to feel the weight of you not trying. Desperation speaks from fear of loss. Strength speaks from self-trust. And when self-trust becomes visible through calm behavior, steady boundaries, and emotional restraint, it creates a gravity that pulls attention, respect, and intention back toward you without effort or performance or explanation.